I guess when I passed out, it seemed like I was transported some way, but it happened in seconds.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bridget Peoples, and I have with me today John McMichen. I'm super excited to interview him and have him share his story, how his near-death experience or out-of-body experience went to a previous life. Out of all the interviews I've done, he is very unique in the fact that I've never got to interview someone that had a past life experience. So welcome, John, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Bridget.
Yeah. So take us back. You said that you were sick with the flu. So what happened back then that day?
Well, I had been sick most of the day with vomiting and abdominal pain and diarrhea. I wasn't able to eat or drink. This went on for hours, and there came a point when it felt as though I passed out. I had kind of crawled out of the bathroom. My wife was with me, and after I woke up again, she said that I had been taking a nap for about 20 minutes, but it seemed like it had been much longer.
So what did you see? What happened? So 20 minutes, because on the other side, there is no time and space. So we could
Right.
be there like forever and not realize it's just a short amount of time here in the physical world. What did you see?
Well, I guess when I passed out, it seemed like I was transported some way, but it happened in seconds. There might have been a few seconds there when I was traveling somewhere, or I got that impression. I'm not really sure, but I had the impression that I was traveling for a few seconds. And then when I arrived at the destination, I was laying on a table in an old Western saloon. It had been a card table or a gambling table. And I was in this old Western saloon that one might have seen in the southwestern US in the 1800s. The people were dressed in clothes of that appeared to be of that time. They were not wearing modern clothes. They were wearing clothes from what appeared to be another time. But I had been shot in the abdomen, and I had been laid on this table, and I guess someone called for a doctor. A doctor did arrive, and he was an older man. He did wear a coat and sort of a funny looking bow tie, not like a modern bow tie.
No.
No. And he had on a little hat, not a cowboy hat. It was a smaller hat with a narrow brim, but it was not a cowboy hat. And he began probing the bullet wound in my abdomen with his finger.
Did you feel?
Yes, it was very painful.
Oh no.
And he wasn't wearing gloves. The odd thing is he wasn't wearing gloves, and that struck me as very strange.
Did they have them back then?
I don't think so. I don't think.
It's like, I might explain away.
Yeah, he was not wearing gloves, and he was trying to get the bullet, and I think eventually he did retrieve the bullet, but the pain was very severe.
Oh.
Wow. There were other people in the saloon. I didn't really make a lot of note of them, but that's the most of the memory that I have of being unconscious. But when I woke up 20 minutes later, it felt like I had been gone much longer. So there may have been other things I don't remember. I thought I had been gone maybe 20 years or more.
Wow.
When I woke up, it took a while to remember the house where I had lived. And it was kind of amazing that when I looked at my wife and my children, they weren't any older. And I thought that was very strange. They were the same age as when I left. And I kept asking my wife, I kept asking my wife what happened, and
Mhm.
all she would say was, you were taking a nap for maybe 20 minutes.
She thought.
Thought. but
Oh my God.
but the only thing I could liken it to is if you had been on vacation, say in Hawaii for 6 months, and you stepped off the plane back home. It was sort of that feeling like I'm back in a place that I remember.
Mhm.
It's been a long time since I've been here, and it might take a while to maybe remember where your bedroom was or where the kitchen was. It comes back when you see it, but it had been gone. If you've been in a place that was not associated with your home, it would take a while for those things to come back. And they did. I eventually figured out where I was.
Yeah.
But it was a very strange, odd feeling.
Mhm. Did you find that you had abdominal pain that continued after that, or did you get better fairly quickly after they removed that bullet?
I don't know what happened. Well, I do know what happened to that life from a hypnosis session, but
Ooh,
when the
share.
pain got, I'm sorry.
Oh, please share what happened.
When the hip, years later, I couldn't figure out what happened there. So I went to a hypnotist who took me back to that time. And I just followed her direction, but it did take a while for me to die. According to what I remembered from her direction in the hypnosis, it took a while to die. And when I floated away from the place where I had died, I had been moved across the street from the saloon into another building. It wasn't a hospital. It was just another building. It could have been a hotel or something. I'm not sure. But as I floated away from the body at the time of death, I could look down and see the little western town. And the saloon was actually across the street from the building that I floated away from.
Wow.
And it appeared that some time had passed since the bullet wound and the time of death. Not years, but maybe a couple of weeks. According to the hypnosis, I did not remember all that from the actual out-of-body experience, but I did seem to remember that under hypnosis.
Wow. Isn't that incredible? It blows my mind sometimes to think when people say, because I've always believed in reincarnation, but when I think back, someone recently said to me, we've been on this planet for how many ever millions of years. I'm like, well, gosh, how many lifetimes have we had? Obviously more than one. I've been hypnotized, going to school to learn hypnosis as a CHT. I've been hypnotized a lot to where we did a lot of past lives. And I'm thinking, I remember 5 or 6, but 2 very clearly, but I'm thinking, good God, how many lives did we really have? Did they say anything about what kind of work you did or what led up to that shooting in that lifetime?
Yes. The hypnosis did. And in this life, as a young man, I had this dream way before the out-of-body experience and way before the hypnosis. I had a very vivid dream that was unlike most dreams that I could remember. And again, the dream seemed to be set in maybe the 1800s. And in this dream, I was wearing a dark blue uniform, a dark blue coat, dark blue trousers, and someone. I was apparently an officer in an army, and I had been summoned to meet with the general, and I walked into this farmhouse. And the thing that struck me about the dream was that inside the farmhouse, the floor was made of planks of wood that were maybe 18 inches wide or 20, huge planks of wood. They were not painted. And when I walked into the room, the general was sitting at a little desk or table, and he had a little oil lamp or a kerosene lamp, something like that. And he stood up and he called me lieutenant, and he said, "I'm giving you a promotion." And that's about all I remember of that dream. But when I did undergo hypnosis later, I said that I had been an officer in the Union Army in the American Civil War. And I survived the war, but then I went west, which a lot of a lot of soldiers who survived the war did go west.
Yeah.
And I ended up in this Western gambling town, drinking and gambling and
Oh my goodness.
just kind of living a life of, I guess, enjoyment in a way. I guess you could call it a life of enjoyment. And apparently I was a pretty good gambler. That's what I did for a living at that time. But these cowboys who drove cattle would come into this town, and even I've never played poker in this life. I have no desire to, but if you can imagine, if you play poker every day and then you're pitted against someone who never plays poker, I mean, who's going to win? I mean,
Yeah.
So I ended up taking money from these people in cattle drives. They had made money. They came into this town from a cattle drive. They had a lot of money. They wanted to go to the saloon and gamble, but apparently they weren't very good at it. And I ended up taking money from people, and as a result of that, I was shot. The man, I did forget to say that the man who shot me, I do remember that from this experience. He had fired a gun underneath the table. I was winning his money. He became angry and he fired a gun underneath the table, and the bullet struck me in the abdomen. But it was because he was losing, and maybe he thought I was cheating. I was not cheating at that time. I was not above cheating, but at that time I was not cheating. But he lost a lot of money and became angry and shot me.
Sadly, people are still that way today when they lose a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I can understand why you don't gamble in this lifetime. That makes perfect sense. Totally.
I've never had any desire to play poker or go to Las Vegas.
I would be like, no. Oh my God, that's crazy. It's incredible though, just the different details that we get in our past lives and the different experiences. So I could honestly see, as you in this lifetime, we know people get really angry if they lose anything, whether it's a sports game or a lot of money gambling. People just unfortunately become unhinged nowadays. They have for a long time, but it's funny that it's not funny, but it's interesting that even 100 and some years ago, do you know what year it was?
In hypnosis, I said that I died in 1884.
Okay. So over 100 years ago. And then even today that people are still doing that, pulling out their guns, when they lose. So it's just amazing that still happens, unfortunately. We have 1884. So what year were you born in this lifetime?
I was born in 1961, which would have been about 100 years later. 100 years later. 80 years later. 80 years later. Sorry, 80 years later.
Math, It's like I have to think of math all the time. I work with elderly people. And so when they're giving me, I was born in 1929. I was born in 1933. And I'm like, so I'm constantly having to do the math with them. And I'm like, well, how old are you? And I love when they're like almost 100, like 96. Oh, I'm 74. I'm like, well, you realize you should be 96. Really? Where'd the time go? I'm like, so I always have fun with them, especially when they got some cognitive impairment. It's always kind of cute to play with them in their age. And whatever age they tell me, I just go with that. That's how young you feel. Great. It's kind of fun. But for the hypnosis, you went the one time. Did it help give you any peace of mind though, with the passing from that lifetime with how you died?
It did. I was still, after the hypnosis, it was so vivid, but I suppose I was still unconvinced. There was this thing, did I make that up? At like at one point in the hypnosis, I was riding a horse in a column of soldiers, and
Mhm.
I saw this horse in front of me that I'd never seen in this life. And I had a friend who was a horse person, and I asked them, what kind of horse is that? And they did tell me it was a dapple roan, and I looked up that horse, and it did appear to be the horse I saw.
Oh, neat.
Um, but it was very vivid. In the hypnosis, um, horses. I was dressed in the uniform, riding horses, camping. There was one battle I wasn't too interested in describing the battle, although I did describe um, a battle. Apparently, I was in the cavalry, Union cavalry, and at one battle, I said the infantry was in front of us, and we were being held in reserve. And years later, I was driving out to Arkansas, and I stopped by the Battle of Shiloh. I'd never been there, and I was just wandering around, and I saw this plaque that said General Grant held his cavalry in reserve at this point. And so I started reading about that battle.
Uh-huh.
I had mentioned a name of who I was in that life, and I'm like, this can't be right. So I did some research and tried to find the name of that soldier. There was one soldier in the Ohio Cavalry by the name I had said under hypnosis, and he would have been at the battle where the cavalry was held in reserve. So I spent a lot of years trying to, I guess, convince myself if this was accurate or not.
Yeah.
I did say that I died at about 50 years old, and the man in the Ohio Cavalry was born. He would have been about 50 years old in 1884. I did look up his date of birth, but I've never been able to find how he died or when he died.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if it's recorded.
Were you able to recall the town that you died in, that you passed in your former life?
He didn't ask me the name of the town, and I didn't mention it, but when I floated away, the saloon was on the corner, and I was across the street. I still remember how the town looked, and
Wow.
I've searched the internet for a saloon on the corner, and I just haven't been able to come up with a lot.
But state or anything? Do you remember the states that you were in at the time? No?
I didn't say, she didn't ask. It seemed to be while I was under hypnosis, I would answer the things she asked.
Uh-huh.
But in between those times, I seemed to have a very blank mind. I only followed direction.
Yeah.
I didn't think about other things, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. Yeah. That's so fascinating, though. How do you feel today? Do you feel that it was a real experience today, knowing what you've learned since this experience?
I do. I spent a lot of time reading other books, and I have read books about Edgar Casey and also a man named Joseph Ruloff, who were sort of mediums, I guess you could call them that. And they described reincarnation and gave me some more information about it. And I did come to believe it. I believe that life was real.
Yeah. I believe it was. Absolutely. It's hard to go into that much detail and feel that experience if you haven't actually had the experience. There's no way in the subconscious mind, from what I know of studying how our brains work in psychology and also hypnosis, we can't recall things that we haven't experienced, but every lifetime we've had is somewhere locked in here, and it does take time, and eventually we will learn how to unlock those. And like I said, having many past life regressions I've done, just because it was part of my schooling, it was really interesting, all the details. Did you recognize anyone in that lifetime, in this lifetime?
won't say that I recognized anyone. When there are some things in that life that are not, I'm not very proud of. When I died, there was a woman running across the street from the saloon. The saloon was on the corner, and when I died, I floated up from this other building that was across the street. And as I floated away, this woman was running from the saloon to the place where my body was. And it seemed like I got a lot of information somehow. She had worked in the saloon, and I tended, yes,
Yeah.
I tended to associate with women of the saloon in that life.
Most men did, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But she really cared a lot about me, and I didn't really realize it in that life. But after death, I did realize it.
Yeah. I think that, the things that we do in past life, they're for our soul involvement, And so, and I understand that it's like we were not proud of some of the things we did, but that was the experience and the goal for that lifetime, So regardless of how we came in and ended, it was in our divine plan. So I think that's kind of cool. But yeah, I could see that having a hard time. I've been Native American in a past life and was shot in the head. And that kind of started, I had a headache for 4 days. And so it took a while because the person that did the hypnosis wasn't very well trained. So to have us not feel that experience in that way. So like you with the abdominal pain, my headache was there. It was 4 days, but the man followed me into this lifetime. It was a cowboy. I remember I would wake up when we lived, probably 15, well, now probably 25 years, because my son's going to be 25. And I kept telling my husband, there's this man standing over me, and I'd wake up and panic. He had on the hat, had a beard, had black hair, and he'd stand over me, and he always had a knife in his hand too. And I was like, what in the, and so I would wake up in a panic, and I told my husband, this is freaky. People would come over and say, oh, you have a ghost at the end of your home. Like, I know, because he was always there. And now I know exactly who he is. He started laughing and told me his name. It's like, okay. This individual, though, he was the man that shot me in that past life when I was Native American. It was, the moon was out. I was at the lake. I don't know if I was meditating or what I was doing. I had on this really thin, long brown hair. I had feather in my hair. And this man just came up and shot me just because I was a Native American, at the time, and then followed my soul into this life. I finally pretty much have gotten rid of him. He hasn't been around in years, but I remember that clearly. And until I acknowledged him in that lifetime, that past life regression, that's when he finally left, because I did leave him there and move forward. So I don't know who he is. I do and I don't. It's like, okay, I know who he is now. Yeah, I have my youngest son, and I don't know, how many children do you have?
They're grown.
They're grown. So do they have intuitive abilities as well?
Not really. I have shared these feelings with them, but they just kind of smile and they don't really believe. They think their father's a little crazy.
Right. And do you feel that you're a little crazy? I was to say you're not crazy. I've met a lot of people. You're definitely not crazy. Yeah.
Well, I guess the only thing that says to me that says I'm not is I obtained a very high level of education, a very high level of function.
Yeah.
In a specialized field. So most crazy people couldn't do that.
You're probably like me, where we have to see it, feel it, experience it, or it ain't real. I'm really, even though as a medium, it took a long time for me to accept that fact. I was in my 30s, and my husband and I have been together 33 years. And I remember telling him when we were in our early 30s, I go, I think I'm a psychic, and he would laugh and do the bula bula and woo woo, and all that stuff. And I asked for a sign, because I said, I want to study hypnosis. And he's like, okay. And my pastor at the time said, well, you're not intuitive enough. So I'm like, okay, God, I need a sign. And my husband goes, yeah, let's give her a sign, being the smart ass that he is. Absolutely adore him. But he ended up, I felt for about 11 days an impact, a car accident, a semi and a white pickup. And spirit has a great way of letting me feel everything, but not making that connection. They give me the euphoric, everything's okay. So they're showing me the semi, they're showing me the white pickup, but they're not telling me the semi is my husband's semi at that time. And so, again, this is in my early 30s. And so, sure enough, by day 11, I'm literally feeling the impact. I thought I was going crazy. My kids totally thought I was nuts, and I could literally feel this impact. And my husband comes up and pats me on the head and gives me a kiss on the forehead and said, "You need a nap." Because I'm like, "Did they just hit us?" And he's just freaking out. And the next morning, I did some prayer for my husband and the person in the white truck, and still not realizing, Well, at 9 a.m., I'm normally on the phone with him. And this morning, everywhere I went, strangers were stopping me, and we had conversations like we'd known each other forever. And then I finally got this feeling, go home, and I do. And I can hear the phone ringing, and I go in and I check back then because no cell phones, and there was nothing on caller ID. And I thought, well, that's weird. As I'm holding the phone, it rings. It's my husband, and he tells me I've been in an accident. Well, I kept seeing a white pickup hitting the semi. So he hit the back two sets of wheels on the tractor of the semi, busted the drive shaft. The white pickup was traveling 65 miles an hour. My husband was doing 55 with 80,000 pounds strapped. He worked for a high lift company at the time, so heavy equipment. There was ditches on both sides of the road, and he said that he saw the pickup disintegrate on impact. So he said it felt like someone just set his truck down and stopped it, because the tractor's disabled, but that trailer with all that weight is still going. And it should have really snapped and went through the cab, they said, and killed him, and it didn't. So he got out, runs back. The gentleman is literally thrown from the pickup, but he was caught up on the seatbelt. So my husband cut him loose. That man only suffered seatbelt burns.
Wow.
And after
So
that,
no one was seriously injured.
nobody was injured. No, just seatbelt burns for that man. And my husband, of course, the PTSD of seeing this flash of white, anyone, coming from the right of him driving, it took him a long time, but they said the impact was like a 5,000-pound bullet hitting him, the weight of that. So after that, I looked at him, I go, well, I guess I'm psychic. And I walked away because he is in total shock. And of course, ever since then, I'd always felt stuff as a kid, but that was like the defining moment for both of us that, oh God, she really does have this ability to predict. So yeah.
He did believe you after that.
Oh yeah, he still does. Oh yeah, he gets all kinds of good stuff. When it comes to manifesting too, people will say, oh, I don't know what it is to manifest, because our thoughts, and you've probably done the research at this point in life, but our thoughts, we put it out there what we want, and then it just shows up in different forms, but it shows up. And so anytime I tell him he wanted a pickup, yeah, I see a big white bow. It's like we make one payment, it's yours. So he goes, so can I buy it? I go, yeah, one payment, it's ours. And he's like, okay. So he buys the pickup, and it's probably, oh God, it was a 04 Super Duty crew cab back in 2005. And it was about, 40,000, I think, somewhere around that. I had to lift. It's beautiful, beautiful truck. We still have it. It has like 60,000 miles only on it, but we have it. But we made one payment, and we're going to have to make another payment. And it's almost $800, like $700 some dollars. And I'm like, crap, I don't want to give up my bonus money, So he goes, well, now we're going to have to call him the payment. His grandma pulls in and says, we just sold 10 acres to the city. Can I get the balance of your truck? I'm going to pay it off. Merry Christmas. And I looked over at him and I just winked at him, and he goes, did you know? Did you know? And I'm like, no. So they paid off his truck, his brothers, and his sisters. And then my sister-in-law says, well, our check was $12,000 less, because they'd had theirs for 2 years. And she goes, you think she'll give us the difference in cash? And I looked at her and I says, you do realize the gift is you don't have a car payment anymore. That is the gift. The dollar amount is insignificant, But yeah, anything he asked me, can I have this or that? And it's like, what's going to happen? But yeah, so over the years, even my kids, one of them, complete faith, and every time they get what they want. It just shows up. It's amazing how spirit and the universe works with them. It's incredible. Yeah. A lot of cool experience. Yeah. But your children, so I don't have to ask, what kind of work do you do? You have to tell me who you work for, if you want to share.
Well, my undergraduate degree was in electrical engineering, and I still teach. I'm teaching classes in that at a local college,
Nice.
but my graduate degree was I was a medical doctor, still am,
Oh, okay.
uh, emergency physician,
Okay.
and I've had some other people tell me that some patients that came back from cardiac arrest told me they were in another place and came back, and
Oh,
maybe that may have helped me believe in what happened to me.
yeah.
But the medical establishment doesn't really
Mm-mm.
um, they don't have an opinion about whether there's a life after death. Usually it's these experiences are attributed to chemical stress of the brain, as they might describe it. um,
What do you
you
think
know no I
after
mean
this experience?
no,
Yeah.
that was not a
Yeah.
it was more real than sitting here. It was more real, or it seemed more real.
Yeah.
um, but no, I can't agree with him on that point.
No. What do you think? So having that experience and then being a doctor, do you think that in that I'm trying to think of the question when I ask, it's having that experience with having a past life experience, has there made an impact on this lifetime for you? Is there like a reason why you felt for some reason, over time, have you thought about it or it's popped in your head? Have you thought about how that has impacted your life this time, in this lifetime? The experience.
There were negative and positive effects from it.
Mhm.
um, I guess the negative part is I couldn't convince people close to me that this really happened, and they didn't really believe me.
Yeah,
And
that
I guess that,
happens.
but after I thought about it, I thought, if it had not happened to me, I probably would not believe it either.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't happen to them, I shouldn't expect them to believe it.
Yeah.
Um, the positive things, it did lead to, I guess, some personal understanding that I did not have. It led to some study that I would have otherwise not have done.
Oh, okay.
And it gave me peace of mind, but because I grew up in a very fundamentalist Christian home,
Yeah.
where there was a lot of teaching about, uh, you know, suffering eternally in a hellish place versus going to a heaven where, people were singing and
Yeah.
things like that. And so there was no in between.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of fear as a child growing up in a church like that.
Yeah.
Fear of death. So the positive things, it did help me overcome a fear of death, and help me replace maybe those beliefs with other beliefs that are really my own, not just what someone told me.
Yes, absolutely. Growing up, my mom always worked. She ended up being a single mom, and we would go to church and Sunday school with the neighbors. And being a child that knew things, and back then, and I always encourage people, please listen to your children. If they say someone's touching them, listen. A friend of mine, we had a neighbor that was like the little girls will just say, and I would always say, he's, putting my finger, that I always cover my mouth. That's rude and disrespectful. But at church, you're right. They would say, oh, you're going to hell, you're going to this. As a medium and someone who has brought through so many spirits, every single one of them comes from this amazing place, and this amazing light. And they all have such different experiences. Some of them see the streets paved of gold. Others go to this shack first, and then they meet their ancestors. So there's so many cool experiences, and there has to be more than just this, this can't be it. But I used to think that when you die, you die, there was nothing more to that. But again, until those experiences, I had those life-saving experiences, even as a teenager, where my gut would hurt so bad, kind of what you explained. And I doubled over in pain where I was crawling. And then once I got away from the danger, and I found out hours later, there was a major issue that went down, but it saved me. And I always kind of trusted my gut. And growing up in an alcoholic home, my dad was extremely aggressive and violent. He had a brain injury. So, he couldn't be responsible for it. But always having to know where the danger was, I think, is why I was so heightened as a young child. And then the church experience. I don't go to church. If I go to church, it's a spiritualistic church that believes in, the amazing stuff in heaven, not the stuff that they preach in most religions. So definitely not mainstream religion. And I let the kids, my kids are all adults. My youngest is 25, oldest is 36, and they have kids now too. So I'm just like, encourage them to share and don't judge what they're telling you if they see things or hear things that nobody else hears. It's really important, that they do that. And they're pretty good about it, And yeah, the grandkids come up with some stuff and I'm just like, okay. But I know it's real because I've experienced it, but it is hard. And I mean, I'm a very rational person like yourself. You have to prove it to me first. And because of that, yeah. My husband's a police officer, so he's the same way. So this is not his, he loves what I do as far as helping people and bring them closure. And I think for me, that's the biggest reason of doing not just this, but mediumship work to help give peace of mind that there is life after death. Your family's here with you and they're so proud of you or just happy and they're at peace. And I think that's the biggest message, that love piece, Yeah. That's cool. You must see a lot though in your career.
Yeah.
I bet.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. No, I can imagine. Yeah. That's the hard part, I think. It's the hard part. Has any of the people that have, gone into cardiac arrest and came back, have they had such interesting, experiences that the rest of your coworkers are like, no, or yeah, I believe that happened. Have you guys noticed or sensed spirit in the room when someone does flatline?
I can't, but I did work with a nurse who would see a shadow when someone was going to die. And one night in the ER, I was working with her and she said, I just saw the shadow go by.
Uh-oh.
And I said, oh no. Yeah. I said, and we had a man with chest pain. So I said, okay, let's get ready. Yeah. So we got the crash cart and we all went in there and he's looking at us like, is something wrong? And I said, no.
That's a little unnerving. Oh my God.
I felt like saying not yet.
Not yet. Give it a minute.
We're watching the cardiac monitor because I believe this nurse. I believe her.
Yeah.
And then he's looking at us like, why are you all in here? And I said, yeah. we're just being cautious, So then I hear another nurse call me and they said, Dr. McMichen, could you come to ICU for a moment? And I said, well, it's kind of important here. What do you need? And she said, well, the person just died and we just need you to pronounce them. They were DNR.
Wrong room.
Said, okay, wrong room. Everybody go back to your lives. I'm going to ICU. But some people some people can sense that. I cannot.
Yeah, they can. It's interesting. And we lost our grandma a couple months ago, my husband's grandma. And I was in the room with her and it's really hard for me to sit there and I'm just like, and my husband, of course, can see his dad doesn't know what I do. And after 33 years, you'd think he'd know, but he doesn't. And so my husband's just like, and he notices I'm doing this with my hand. And usually they'll come and step through and they're doing this and they'll tap my hand. I don't do that stuff, but I always can tell if somebody else, I'll notice like, someone's with me, because they're patting my hand, they're consoling me is what they're doing as grandma's laying there. And I knew it was her sister, but it just felt like the room was full of people. Like I was like, and after we left, I said, grandma's she's gonna transpire before we come back tomorrow. I said, but she really does not want us here. They've let me know she doesn't want us here. And sure enough, I think she passed around 5 a.m. in the morning and she had really shallow labored breathing. And I was just rubbing her forehead and telling her, it's okay. I know they're all here waiting for you. And it was having severe hallucinations until about 3 days before she passed. And that's when the hallucination shifted to seeing her family in a positive light. Because prior to that, she was like, they're calling me this, they're calling me that. And she was blind with macular and she was deaf. So for her to see and hear this stuff going on, I'm just like, nobody else realizes that, of course, she's seeing and hearing them. She doesn't have this sight or this. How else is she seeing them? And nobody really thought about it. And I'm just sitting there going, because I work in assisted living and memory care. So I'm around death every day. And I'm just like, watching this transitioning, and I'm just, and there just my husband, he went and saw her in the morning after she passed. And I was like, please don't go see your grandma, because he can't handle death the way I can, because I do something different. Please don't do this. And so sure enough, he goes in there and I'm just like, did you? He goes, I shouldn't have done that. I'm like, and you shouldn't have done it with your mom and your grandpa, but he did. And at the funeral, my kids also have sight, but they try to, not talk about it ever. And at the funeral, though, she's literally at the front of her casket, sitting there tapping her fingers, like, let's get on with it. And the preacher was so far off cue that she's like, what the hell is he talking about? And I'm having to try to sit there and act like I'm crying, because I'm trying not to laugh. I'm like, come on, kicking some emotions, pinching myself, get some tears going, something, think of something sad. But I'm just sitting there going, oh God. And then they played her favorite song, and then I seen her and grandpa dancing. So that was really cool. And I know my kids were watching me keep it together, mom. Don't let anyone see you smile. They knew. And I was like, oh God. That's always fun. So, but I'm really grateful that you took the time to talk with me and share your story. And I really am grateful that you do have an open mind, with the Western medicine stuff, and that they don't teach it. Having that experience, clearly a reason for that, And I think it's to help other people in their walk and in their faith. I have a feeling that you are you still working in the ER?
Well, the hospital where I worked closed about a week ago, so right now I'm not working, and I may, it just closed. Oh no, it didn't close. I'm sorry, the contract changed. It did not close.
Okay, I was gonna go. I was gonna say, are you guys experiencing? And I'll go ahead and wrap this up first, and I'll have a couple questions after. But thank you so much for allowing me to talk with you today and just sharing your experiences. Awesome. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.